Hi everyone, this is Mary from Mary E. Hebert Photography, and I am coming to you from the beautiful New Hampshire, where it is currently 17 degrees, and we are expecting 1 to 2 feet of snow in the next 24 hours. So I'm going to make this quick. So I've had a lot of emails and messages and requests lately to do a quick tutorial on lighting. If you are a new photographer and you're struggling with lighting, please don't feel like you are alone, and don't feel like you need to throw in the towel. You're never going to get this. I know photographers who have been in the industry for 15 years who struggle with lighting. Lighting is one of the toughest topics that you can possibly tackle in photography. Today we're going to cover how to deal with harsh lighting, mostly midday lighting. So in the perfect utopian photography world, it would be golden hour all the time. Golden hour is the hour after sunrise, the hour before sunset, when the light is soft, it's warm, it's beautiful, you can get gorgeous tones, and your pictures are flawless. Of course, we all wish that we could just shoot during golden hour. That would be fantastic, but we can't. I myself, I specialize in family and child photography, and especially during the summer here, golden hour doesn't occur till like after 8 o'clock, and most kids are in bed by then. So it's just not realistic to photograph most families and kids during golden hour during the summer. So I find myself having to photograph during midday or even in the late afternoon sun, which is still very strong. So I am going to go outside and show you some different lighting conditions for this tutorial. I'm going to start inside because it's freezing, and do as much as I can in here. But the two biggest principles that you need to remember when you're photographing outside in harsh sunlight conditions, and these were taught to me by my mentor, who is Jeff Dachowski, who is amazing, so look him up. I will never forget the words he told me. He said, number one, you block the light from above, and number two, you create contrast. Now I find that most photographers are really good about following the first rule. They block the light from above. They look for shade, they look for open shade, they make a scrim, whatever they need to do to get that light blocked. And then they're really bad about following through with the second part, which is create contrast. And their images look very flat. And that's the last thing we want. We don't want flat lighting. We want interesting lighting. We want contrast. We want people's eyes to be drawn to our portraits. So, starting with the first tool, block the light from above. How do you do that? Well, there's a million ways you can do that. You can look for open shade, which open shade is any kind of shade that doesn't have speckled light coming through, in which your subjects are completely covered in shade. You can also try to build a scrim, which a scrim is like a tent or an awning or anything that kind of diffuses the light, or even if you have someone who can hold a reflector over your subject to diffuse the light, that works as a scrim. And I'm going to show you a couple options in a minute. Or you can look for any kind of like overhang, or like maybe there's a gazebo or anything that you can go in that's going to block the light from above. But that is the number one thing you want to do, is you need to block out those sun rays that are coming in. And I'm going to show you a few ways to do that. First off, we're going to talk about a 5-way reflector. So a 5-way reflector can be bought super cheap on Amazon, between $12 and $15. They're all the same. It's not a big deal. What brand you go with, what kind you go with. I've lost a million covers. I have extra reflectors in my trunk. Like, I keep them everywhere. This one's obviously had some wear and tear. The handle's broken, whatever. So this is a 5-way reflector. And when you open it up, it's gonna pop open. And actually, if you're working with toddlers or little kids, this is kind of a fun thing that I do with them, is I was like, hey, want to see a magic trick? And I pop this open and I go, woo! All right. So your 5-way reflector comes with, you guessed it, 5 options. If you unzip it, you can unzip it. You can see I clearly don't do this very often. If you unzip it, the middle area here can be taken out and works great as just a regular scrim. In a scrim, see, it's just a diffused white surface. A scrim is what you would have someone hold over your subject to block the light from above. That's a scrim. It just diffuses the light. Your other options is there is a gold side, there's a white side, there's a silver side, and there's a black side. So I never use the black side. I've never had a reason to. I've used the white side, but I don't use it that often, but I do use it. I find myself 99% of the time using the silver side or the reflector because it gives me the best light that I'm looking for. Now, granted, I live in New Hampshire. There's not a lot of diversity around here, and I myself am super pale and Irish and never get to see the sun because it's 17 degrees out. So the silver works really well for me. If you work with a lot of clients who have that like beautiful African-American skin or like a beautiful almond color, the gold reflector is beautiful on their skin. So you might consider doing that. On a person like me who's Irish and pale, using the gold reflector makes me look like I have jaundice. So I don't usually use the gold reflector. I use the silver side almost all of the time. So, having said that, you can zip it up in this handy dandy little all-in-one reflector, and I typically keep it on this side. Now, in situations I've had before, like once when I was at a relative's house, and I happened to have my camera, it was Easter, and they suddenly sprung it on me like, hey, can you do our family portraits? Well, I'm not really prepared to do family portraits. I didn't have off-camera flash, I didn't have a reflector. So what did I do? I went and I raided my father-in-law's basement. He's a contractor, so he's got all kinds of stuff down there. And I found this lovely, what I was actually using to bounce light onto my face during this tutorial, piece of styrofoam. It's actually insulation. You can get these huge pieces at any Home Depot, any Lowe's. They're super cheap. They come in gigantic pieces. You can cut them down to any size you want, and these work awesome as reflectors. And they also work awesome as a scrim, so you can use them as either. I've used them as reflectors to bounce light back in people's faces. I've used them to block the sun. They're absolutely awesome. They're just not as mobile. They're hard. They're clunky and they're big and they're hard to move around. They blow away in the wind a lot. I am one that uses off-camera flash all the time. I love my off-camera flash. Couldn't live without it. But in the situation where I can't bring it out, like say it was a super windy day, it's really hard to keep your lighting up because the wind is constantly blowing it over, and no one wants to watch their $1,200 lighting setup get blown over in the wind. I will bring an assistant and a reflector, and it's just much easier to do in that situation. So I'm going to do my best to try to go outside and to show you a few different scenarios on how you would light your subject in the middle of the day with super bright lighting and still get flawless portraits. So here we go. I'm excited. Alright guys, so here we are in my beautiful backyard. It's gorgeous landscaping, of course. This time of year is just beautiful in New England. So as you can see, I'm now standing in direct sunlight. The sun is coming from literally right over my head, and it's creating shadows under my eyes, under my nose, and under my chin, exactly where I don't want shadows. And it's also making me squint because it's right in my eyes, and that's the last thing we want is pictures of our subject squinting. So we're gonna go look for some better lighting, and I'm also gonna show you what's not the answer to this problem. So stay tuned, we're gonna go to the next section, and I'm gonna show you what to do. Alright guys, so this is what I would consider to be speckled shade. This is not what we want. It appears to be open shade, but if you see, if I move around a little bit, the sun is still hitting certain parts of my face. And we don't want that. We want our subject completely in the shade. So if you're finding sunspots still hitting your subject no matter where you move them, then you need to find a different location to put them in, because this is just not ideal lighting situations for what we're trying to achieve. Alright guys, so I found a great spot here. We have the sun slightly behind me, so it's giving me a nice hair light, separating me from the background a little bit. But my face is completely in the shade, which means it's completely flat lit, and it has no contrast to it, which makes it really uninteresting to look at. Now, if you're shooting a headshot and it's just one person, or like a senior photo shoot, you can have them actually hold the reflector right in front of them. So they could hold this up just like this, and you could take a headshot and they could get some of that extra detail bounced up into their face. Now, if you're not shooting just one person, you are shooting like a family, it's best to have an assistant with you, which I do not have today, as usual. So I'm going to do my best to try to set this reflector up a little bit so that it will hold for just a second, hopefully long enough for me to show you what I'm doing. Right here. Here comes the shot. Okay. So now that reflector is going to bounce light back into my face. I'm going to try to stay in a spot where you can see me. And if I stand like this and turn back into the reflector is going to give me just enough light to highlight under my eyes, under my chin, and under my nose where those harsh shadows from the sun would be accentuated. So it's just enough fill light to make it have a little bit of contrast, like lessen the harsh shadows and make it a little bit more of a flattering portrait. You also usually want your shoulders facing away from your lighting source and your face facing towards it. That's just kind of a more flattering position. So this is a very typical photo that I would do and a pose that I would do with this lighting setup. Okay, so here I am back in the comfort of my own home and not in the 17-degree weather outside. I'm sorry if parts of this video were a little bit blurry. I'm still getting used to using my camera as a video camera and not just as a regular camera. But if you guys have any more questions, please feel free to email me, maryehebert@gmail.com. You can also check me out in my group, Photography for the Passionate Beginner, or look me up on my page, Mary E. Hebert Photography. I'm happy to answer any questions. I love doing tutorials. Give me any advice that you can for the future. If there's anything that you really want to see, I'd love to hear from you. And once again, thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.